The third time changed everything. I remember it clearly, the sound, the stillness, the way the air itself refused to move. That was the third time it happened. The third time I should have died. But time stopped instead. The first thing I felt wasn't fear. It was silence, a silence so heavy it pressed against my chest. And in that silence something whispered, "Not yet. Not yet." Because heaven had other plans. I didn't realize it back then. But every close call, every moment that should have been my last, was part of a greater pattern. I wasn't being spared by luck. I was being prepared by purpose. You know those moments when everything slows down, when the world blurs, and you can feel reality folding in on itself? That's what it feels like when heaven reaches into time and says, "Pause," and somehow you're still here. Maybe you felt it too, that eerie stillness before disaster, that sense that someone, somewhere, intervened. When I think back now, I realize something sacred happened each time. The closer I came to death, the more alive my spirit became. They say angels work in mysterious ways, but when you've seen death stop mid-stride, you stop believing in coincidence. You start believing in divine choreography. Every near miss, every breath you still take, they're not random. They're reminders. That day, time didn't just stop for me. It opened. It was as if the universe itself inhaled and whispered, "You're not done yet." And maybe, just maybe, if you're watching this right now, you've heard that whisper too. Because people like us don't find these words by accident. We're drawn to them by something greater than algorithms or fate. We are the ones heaven marked to continue. So, as I begin to tell you about the 3 times I should have died, listen closely, not with your mind, but with your memory. Because somewhere deep inside, you already know why you're still here. If you feel this message was meant for you, take a breath and type 333 below. It's more than a number, it's an acknowledgement that you've heard the call. The first time I noticed the mark, it wasn't even visible. It was a feeling, a heat, that pulsed in my left hand, right where the light had touched me that day. At first, I thought it was just adrenaline or imagination, but then it kept returning. Always in moments when something inside me was shifting, when I was breaking, healing, or waking up. For a long time, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew. Heaven doesn't leave fingerprints without purpose. And whatever this was, it had been placed there long before I ever understood why. Some people carry scars. Some carry calluses. I carry a reminder etched not on my skin, but in my spirit. It burns brightest when I'm about to step into something I can't see yet. It's as if heaven sends a signal through that spot. Move now. It's time. The mark isn't about the hand itself. It's about what you touch, what you build, what you bless, what you let go of. Your left hand is closer to your heart. That's why heaven marks it, because it moves with compassion. Every act of faith, every moment of surrender passes through that same hand. I've met others like me, people who've survived the impossible, who feel that same pulse before major shifts in their lives. They talk about seeing lights, hearing whispers, feeling warmth in the air. They always describe it differently, but the meaning is the same. It's not luck, it's a calling. When the light touched me, I didn't just survive, I was signed. That moment rewrote something in my soul. Since then, I can sense things before they happen, the heaviness in a room, the unseen weight people carry, the divine timing behind every delay. This mark reminds me that protection is never random. Every time you were spared, every time the plan changed at the last second, heaven was saying, "You're still needed." You don't need to see a mark for it to exist. Some of us carry it in our dreams. Some feel it in their bones. Some hear it in a voice that says, "Wait, not yet." Head wilted 200. If you've ever felt that pause, that divine interruption, then you already know what I'm talking about. So if you've ever felt chosen, guided, or protected without reason, maybe you weren't imagining it. Maybe you too carry the mark. If this resonates with your spirit, type 333 below. Not as a number, but as a recognition. You've seen heaven's hand, and it has seen you. The first time death reached for me, I was 17. It was raining, the kind of rain that feels alive, pounding against everything it touches. I remember running, headlights in the distance, and a single second that stretched into eternity. There was a sound, metal twisting, glass shattering, the world folding in on itself. Then silence. The kind of silence that makes you wonder if you're still alive. When I opened my eyes, the car was wrecked, but I was sitting in the middle of the road, untouched. Not a cut, not a bruise, just a pulse in my left hand, burning like fire. The people who saw it said it was impossible. They said I should have been crushed, and maybe I should have been. But the moment the crash happened, I felt something push me, a force, invisible but undeniable, pulling me out of harm's way. I can still feel that impact when I close my eyes. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was intention. Something or someone intercepted that moment. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about time, how fragile it is, how easily it bends when heaven intervenes. That crash didn't destroy me. It rewired me. It made me aware that survival isn't always natural. Sometimes it's supernatural. For weeks, I replayed it over and over. The headlights, the rain, the silence. I asked myself, why me? However, is this? But as days turned into months, I started to understand. The question was never why. It was what now? Every physical pain I've ever felt since that day, every ache, every wound reminds me that I'm still under divine protection. The body remembers trauma, yes, but it also remembers grace. That's why I can't ignore it anymore. Every scar, every close call, every breath I take, they're all evidence of purpose. There's something sacred about walking away from what should have killed you. The air smells different. The world feels sharper. It's as if reality itself pauses and whispers, you've been spared for a reason. They will to graded be ten of to rester. That night was the first time I realized, when heaven protects your body, it's not just saving your life, it's anchoring your mission. Because if your purpose still needs your presence, no force on earth can take you before your time. And as I sat on that cold, wet pavement, staring at the wreckage, I knew this was more than survival. It was a message, one written in the language of miracles. I didn't bleed the second time. There were no sirens, no shattered glass, no witnesses standing in the rain. Only quiet rooms, sleepless nights, and the ache that creeps in when you stop believing tomorrow will ever arrive. It began slowly, like a dimmer switch, turning the world down. The colors faded first, then the sounds dulled. Then the people drifted to the edges of my life until even their voices felt like echoes I couldn't catch. I woke every morning already tired, as if my soul had run a marathon I couldn't remember. I ate because the clock told me to. I smiled because I didn't want anyone to worry. But inside, I was falling through a floor no one else could see. You learn a lot about darkness when it chooses silence over spectacle. It doesn't always break your bones. Sometimes it breaks your will. It whispers that nothing matters, that your efforts are useless, that the world would keep spinning if you simply disappeared into it. It doesn't push. It unplugs. It doesn't destroy. It disconnects. I tried to outwork it. I tried to outrun it. But exhaustion has a way of catching even the fastest runners. There were days I sat at the edge of my bed with my hands over my face, counting my breaths just to prove to myself I was still here. Inhale 1, exhale 2. Sometimes I made it to 10. Sometimes I didn't. The worst part was the lie that wrapped itself in logic. If your life mattered, wouldn't it feel lighter by now? That lie is heavy. It settles on your chest and calls itself reasonable. I started to believe it. I started to plan a smaller life, a quieter life, a life without risk or sound or edges, just enough to pass the time without being seen. But heaven has a way of interrupting even the quietest collapse. On the night I almost gave up for no dramatic reason, just the slow erosion of hope. I felt a familiar heat return to my left hand. Not a burn, a pulse. It throbbed like a distant drum I had heard once before, in another life, on another road. With every beat, a sentence formed. Not yet, not yet, not yet. I didn't rise to my feet in triumph. I didn't deliver a speech. I just breathed longer than before and noticed the smallest shard of light slipping under the door. It wasn't much, but it was enough to prove the darkness had a boundary. After that night, I made a trade. If the weight returned, I would return to breath. If the numbness grew, I would grow a routine sturdy enough to carry a future I couldn't feel yet. Water before words, sunlight before screens. A walk around the block before the world could convince me to sit still and disappear. I set gentle alarms for food, for rest, for prayer that sounded more like groans than sentences. And every time the pulse flickered in my left hand, I whispered back, "I hear you." This was the second escape. And it didn't look like survival from the outside. But surviving your own mind is a miracle too. What death couldn't take with impact, despair tried to drain with silence. And still, I'm here. Not because I won a battle in a single night, but because a boundary I didn't set was set for me. Something holy refused to let the lights go out. Something holy called me back to breath. The third time wasn't seen by anyone. No one would have called it an attack if they'd watched from the outside. No noise, no fire, no visible wound. But I remember it as the most violent moment of all. Because it didn't touch my body, it went straight for my soul. It began as a whisper, a voice that sounded almost kind. It told me to rest, to stop pushing, to just fade out for a while. It used words I had said to myself before. It used my own voice. That's how the darkness works. It never kicks down the door. It just asks to borrow your thoughts for a while. The nights grew heavy again, but this time, the silence wasn't sad, it was strategic. It started replacing memories with doubts, truth with noise, purpose with confusion. I'd wake up feeling like I had walked through smoke, my mind covered in ash. I could still pray, but the words came out flat, as if heaven had gone silent, as if no one was listening. One night, while lying in bed, I felt pressure in the room. Not fear, not presence, pressure. The air thickened, and I knew something was watching me. It wasn't a nightmare. I was wide awake. Every instinct screamed, "Run!" but my body wouldn't move. And then I heard it, that same soft, borrowed voice. "You've done enough. You can stop now." For a second it sounded merciful, almost holy. But the next second, it wrapped around my chest like smoke and squeezed. No sound came out of my mouth. No movement in my limbs. Just a war that no one could see. And then a pulse. Left hand. Same place. Same fire. But this time, it wasn't gentle. It was fierce. It was alive. The light that filled my room wasn't golden or soft. It was white. Almost blinding. The air cracked like thunder without sound. The pressure vanished. The smoke dissolved. And I could breathe again. When I opened my eyes, I was still there. But the room looked different. Brighter, cleaner, lighter. I knew the darkness hadn't come to test me. It came to terminate me. Because when heaven accelerates your calling, hell always sends resistance. I learned something that night. That evil rarely looks evil. It looks logical. It looks familiar. It looks like you. But the mark on my hand burned hot enough to remind me who I was, and whose I was. Since then I stopped asking, "Why am I under attack?" and started asking, "What am I carrying that scares the dark so much?" Because darkness doesn't waste energy on the unimportant. It only aims for those carrying light. That night didn't just save me. It changed my authority. After you've survived a war no one can see, you stop fearing what you can. You stop mistaking peace for absence of battle. You learn that light isn't gentle, it's powerful. It doesn't beg darkness to leave. It commands it to. And every time my left hand pulses now, I know it's not pain, it's power. A reminder that heaven doesn't just protect the chosen. It arms them. So if you've ever felt that invisible pressure, that unseen weight that tries to smother your soul, remember this. You're not losing your mind. You're proving your light. Because when darkness notices you, it's because heaven has already marked you as dangerous. They told me destiny is a straight road, but mine kept widening into detours that looked like dead ends. I used to think I was falling behind, missing my moment, watching other people sprint ahead while I kept circling the same mile. After the 3 escapes, I finally understood. I wasn't late. I was being aligned. My life was not denied, only delayed. Purposefully, mercifully, precisely. Delay feels like punishment when you read it with a clock. Read it with a compass, and it becomes direction. In delay, doors I worshipped quietly locked. Routes I wanted grew narrow. Heaven wasn't withholding. Heaven was editing. The pauses were not empty spaces but workshops, rooms where character was hammered into shape, where my appetite learned to choose bread over candy. I used to pray for acceleration without foundations. I wanted elevation without weight. But structures that rise too fast collapse just as quickly. Delay poured concrete under my calling. Patience, endurance, humility, focus. It taught my gifts to breathe inside boundaries. Because power without borders becomes wildfire. I learned to be faithful in small places. To be excellent in quiet rooms. To become the kind of person my future could safely rest upon. There is a difference between waiting and preparation. Waiting stares at the door. Preparation sets the table. During the delay, I stopped counting minutes and started counting obediences. One honest conversation, one apology I owed, 1 hour with no screen, one chapter read slowly, one prayer whispered when I didn't feel holy at all. Small obediences are like seeds. They make no noise when they break the soil. But one morning, you wake to a field. The delay also changed my relationship with time. Before I chased momentum. Now I court timing. Momentum can be manufactured. Timing must be discerned. When heaven's timeline caught up to me, it didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived like a key that suddenly fit the email answered. After months of silence, the conversation I had stopped forcing, the idea whose hour had finally come. Nothing magical happened, and yet everything moved. There were signs I was exiting delay. Peace grew where anxiety had lived. What used to require strain began to require stewardship. The right people found me while I was busy being faithful. Closed doors didn't haunt me anymore. They started to feel like escort rails. Delay exposed the difference between talent and trust. Talent gets you invited. Trust keeps you useful. Heaven will not place heavy assignments on untested hands. Not because heaven is stingy, but because people are precious. My hands had to learn discipline, kindness, and restraint, so that when power flowed through them, it would heal, not harm. That is why the mark burns hotter when I'm tempted to rush, because rushing turns callings into performances. Purpose thrives only at the speed of wisdom. If you are inside a delay now, ask different questions. Not how long, but who must I become for what I'm asking? Not why is this closed, but what would this open door demand of me tomorrow that I cannot carry today? Destiny is not a prize handed to the lucky. It is weight entrusted to the ready. Most of all, delay purified my definition of success. I had measured it by speed. Heaven measures it by alignment. If success costs your soul, your joy, or your integrity, it's just ambition wearing a crown it stole. Alignment felt smaller from the outside but lighter on the inside. When the next door opened, it did not announce itself. It simply felt inevitable. The meetings weren't better, I was. The opportunities weren't bigger, I was ready. The mark in my left hand didn't burn like fire that day, it hummed like a tuning fork, telling me I was in key. So, no, my destiny wasn't denied. It was delayed until I could handle it without breaking it, until my character could carry my calling home. Delay was not heaven saying stop. It was heaven saying start here. And when the time arrived, I didn't explode into the future. I stepped into it, steady, quiet, certain, like a door that finally turns because the hinges were cared for all along. Awakening never arrives with trumpets. It starts as a vibration you can't name, a pulse in the air, a memory of light you've never seen. After the delay lifted, I began noticing the world breathing with me. The small things shimmered again. The sound of water against stone, the way wind carried conversations between trees, the sunlight lingering a second longer than it should. At first I thought I was just grateful. Then I realized I was being reintroduced not to the world, but to myself. When destiny restarts, it doesn't announce a new chapter. It gives you new eyes. The signs appeared slowly. I began waking at the same hour each night, 3:33 a.m. I'd feel wide awake, not anxious, not restless, just aware. Like someone had whispered my name. It wasn't coincidence. It was calibration. Heaven was syncing my rhythm to its own. During the day, repeating numbers followed me. Receipts, clocks, license plates, 333, 444, 777, To most, they're random digits. To the awakened, they're coordinates. Each one says, "You're aligned. Keep walking." Music sounded different too. Songs I had heard 1,000 times suddenly carried hidden messages, words that fit the exact thoughts I hadn't spoken. Strangers echoed phrases from my prayers. Dreams replayed conversations I hadn't had yet. Everything ordinary turned orchestral. Awakening doesn't add new miracles to your life. It lets you see the old ones correctly. The bird on the wire, the missed train, the phone call delayed, they were never interruptions. They were interventions. I started to understand that awareness itself is proof of connection. Heaven doesn't shout, it resonates. And when your spirit clears enough, you begin to hear what was always playing in the background. A steady hum of guidance, love, and purpose. That's when peace became louder than fear. Not because fear left, but because peace learned to speak at full volume. I didn't need to force doors anymore, they started opening with grace. People re-entered my life, not as lessons, but as confirmations. Every alignment felt less like surprise and more like recognition. Ah, I was meant to meet you here. Awakening is not about escaping the world. It's about seeing it unveiled. It's about realizing that heaven's fingerprints are everywhere on detours, delays, even disappointments. It's about understanding that everything that tried to break you was actually breaking the shell around your light. If you've been seeing the signs, the numbers, the synchronicities, the sudden peace after storms, it's not your imagination. It's an invitation. Heaven is reminding you that you're awake now, that you've crossed from surviving to serving, from wondering to knowing, from searching to seeing. You are no longer waiting for alignment. You are the alignment. And once you see that, you can never go back to sleep again. After awakening, I stopped measuring time in hours. I started feeling it in seasons. Everything in heaven moves in cycles, night into morning, silence into sound, delay into delivery. The human heart calls it waiting. Heaven calls it weaving. I used to think God was late. Now I know he's layered. He doesn't count minutes. He composes measures. While I watched clocks, he was tuning instruments, mine included. And when all the notes aligned, the music began. The divine timeline is not a straight path. It's a spiral, a holy loop that returns you to old lessons. Each time at a higher altitude, you revisit the same mountains, but the view expands each round. That's how heaven trains perception, repetition with revelation. In the world's time, we chase milestones. In heaven's time, we become milestones. We don't hit moments, we embody them. The destination stops being a place and becomes a posture. Presence replaces progress. Stillness replaces striving. On the divine timeline, nothing is wasted. Even your detours are directions. Even your breakdowns become blueprints. Heaven wastes no pain, no pause, no person. Everything you lost is repurposed into fuel. Every delay becomes data in the architecture of destiny. When I look back now, I see threads connecting everything that once felt random. The silence that trained my hearing, the heartbreak that expanded my empathy, the loneliness that sharpened my discernment, the fear that built my faith. I thought I was wandering, but I was walking the map of my own becoming. There is no such thing as being off schedule when your steps are ordered. The clock can betray you. The call never will. Heaven is never behind, it's always building alignment. Sometimes alignment looks like loss. Sometimes it feels like being forgotten. But heaven doesn't forget, it recalibrates. When one door closes, heaven doesn't slam it out of anger. It seals it for your safety. When people leave, heaven isn't punishing you. It's pruning the noise so you can hear what's next. I learned to honor divine timing by surrendering control. Because you can't force what was meant to find you, and you can't miss what was meant to stay. Faith is not just believing something will happen. It's trusting that when it does, you'll be ready. Every destiny has an appointed hour. It's written in light, not ink. You can't read it. You can only recognize it when it arrives. And when it does, everything that once felt heavy suddenly makes sense. The weight turns into wings. The waiting turns into wind. You feel yourself carried not by effort, but by design. That's when you realize heaven's timeline never failed you. You were just catching up to it. Every no was a redirection. Every pause was protection. Every detour was divine choreography. Now, I move slower, not out of fear, but out of faith. Because when you trust the timeline, you stop begging for blessings and start becoming one. You stop asking when, and start whispering, "Thank you, even now." Heaven's clock doesn't tick, it breathes. And the moment your breath matches its rhythm, you'll know you are right on time. When I look back now, I realize the story was never about survival. It was about surrender. Heaven didn't keep me alive just to tell a miracle story. Heaven kept me alive so I could tell a mercy story. Every breath since those 3 escapes has been a reminder. I am not self-made. I am heaven-sustained. Every pulse in my left hand is a whisper that says, "You are still needed." No, the world tells you purpose looks like platform. Heaven says it looks like presence. The world celebrates arrival. Heaven honors endurance. And endurance, I've learned, is a form of worship. Sometimes worship sounds like music. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's just choosing to stay when leaving looks easier. That's the real faith, the quiet kind that doesn't need applause to be real. When I prayed for calling, I thought I'd receive clarity. Instead, heaven gave me character. When I asked for power, I was handed patience. When I begged for open doors, I was taught open hands. I used to think peace was the prize for obedience. Now I know peace is obedience. It's what happens when your spirit finally agrees with its assignment. You don't have to strive anymore. You don't have to prove anything. If you've survived everything meant to end you, you've already passed the test. You've already qualified for grace. Maybe your story doesn't have loud miracles or burning bushes. Maybe your story is breath, still being here, still choosing kindness, still reaching for light when darkness whispers your name. That's sacred enough. The mark on my left hand doesn't burn anymore. It hums like a heartbeat echoing from somewhere higher. I used to ask, "What do you want me to do?" Now I ask, "Who do you want me to become while I'm doing it?" Because heaven cares more about formation than performance. And so, I no longer chase signs. I am one. You are too. Every survivor, every wanderer, every person who's ever wondered why they're still breathing. You're not random. You're recruited. You carry light in your scars, authority in your silence, and grace in your delays. So, if you're listening right now, and something in you feels like home in these words, that's not coincidence. That's recognition. You and I are part of the same story. Different scenes, same author. Before we close, I want you to take one deep breath. Inhale peace. Exhale fear. Whisper this, if it feels true. I am still here for a reason. Again, I am still here for a reason. If you feel calm in this moment, even for a heartbeat, pause and honor it. Don't rush away. This peace is not fragile. It's familiar. It's the rhythm of heaven breathing through you. If you feel calmer now, take a slow breath and write it below. I choose calm. Welly, each time you type those words, you remind your body, calm is a choice. May this calm travel with you long after the video ends. May it fill every delay, every silence, every unanswered prayer. You are not late. You are right on time. And heaven's hand is still on you.